The stove has gone cold sometime in the night. Not completely cold. There is still warmth in the cast iron when I lay my hand against it, but the fire itself is out, and the cabin has dropped into that particular stillness that comes when the heat source fails. I can see my breath. Not much, just a thin curl of vapor that catches what little light comes through the window. The window itself has frost along the edges, not the decorative kind, the kind that tells you the seal is working, but the glass is losing. I do not move right away. There is a moment every morning where the body has to decide whether it is ready. The sleeping bag holds heat well enough. The wool blanket over top of it holds heat even better. But the floor does not. The floor is spruce, and spruce holds cold the way a bucket holds water. Once I put my feet down, the day begins, and the day does not pause. I reach for the headlamp on the shelf beside the bunk. Click it on. The beam cuts across the ceiling and settles on the stove. The damper is closed. That is my fault. I closed it too far last night, trying to stretch the burn, and the fire choked itself out. It happens. You learn the stove over time, but the stove also changes over time. The draft shifts with the weather. The wood varies. Last night, the wind was out of the north, and the chimney pulls differently when the wind is out of the north. I swing my legs out and set my feet on the floor. The cold comes up through the wool socks immediately. Not painful, just present. I stand, and the joints take a moment to remember their work. The knees first, then the lower back. I am not old, but I am not young either, and the cold does not forgive stiffness. The thermometer on the wall reached 22 degrees. That is inside. Outside will be lower. I do not check outside yet. There is no reason to know that number until I am dressed and ready to deal with it. I pull on the wool pants first, then the flannel shirt, then the vest. Layers are not complicated, but they are specific. The body needs to breathe, but it also needs to retain. You learn where the heat escapes. The neck, the wrists, the gap between the shirt and the waistband when you bend. I button the shirt all the way up and tuck it deep. The stove needs attention before anything else. I open the firebox door and look inside. The ash bed is thick, too thick. I should have cleaned it yesterday, but yesterday had its own list, and the ash bed did not make the cut. Now it has. I take the small shovel from the hook beside the stove and begin scraping the ash into the bucket. The motion is familiar. Scrape, lift, dump. Scrape, lift, dump. The ash is fine and gray and rises in small clouds that drift toward the single window. I keep my mouth closed and breathe through my nose. When the firebox is clear enough to see the grate, I set the bucket aside and reach for the kindling box. The kindling box is low. That is another thing that should have been done yesterday. I take what is left. 4 sticks of split spruce drained pale. I arrange them in a loose stack over the grate, leaving space for air to move. Then I take a single sheet of newspaper from the pile by the door and crumple it beneath the kindling. The newspaper is from Anchorage, 3 weeks old. I do not read it anymore. It serves this purpose now. I strike the match and hold it to the paper. The flame catches immediately and climbs into the kindling. I watch it for a moment. The fire is small and uncertain. It needs help. I add 2 more sticks slightly larger and adjust the damper to let more air in. The flame responds. It grows. It begins to crackle. I close the firebox door part way and leave the damper open. The fire will take 20 minutes to reach a working temperature. In that time, the cabin will remain cold. I use that time. The water bucket by the door is frozen on top. Not solid. Just a skin of ice that flexes when I press it with my finger. I break it with the ladle and scoop water into the kettle. The kettle goes on the stove. It will take longer to boil than usual because the stove is still climbing. I accept that. I pull on the insulated boots and lace them tight. Then the heavy coat. Then the hat. Then the gloves. The gloves are wool with leather palms. They are not waterproof, but they are warm. And for the first tasks of the morning, warm matters more than dry. I open the cabin door and step outside. The cold is immediate. It presses against the face and finds every gap in the clothing. The sky is still dark, but there is a thin line of gray along the eastern ridge. Not sunrise, just the suggestion of sunrise. The sun will not clear the mountains for another 2 hours. In early winter in this part of Alaska, the days are short, and the light arrives slowly. The thermometer on the porch post reads 8 degrees. That is colder than I expected. The wind has died overnight, which is why the cabin lost heat so quickly. Wind keeps the chimney drawing. Still air lets the heat settle and stall. I walk to the woodshed first. The path is packed snow, and my boots crunch against it with each step. The woodshed is 30 feet from the cabin, close enough to reach in bad weather, far enough to keep the mice out of the main structure. The door is held close with a simple latch. I lift it and pull the door open. Inside, the wood is stacked in rows. Spruce on the left, birch on the right. The spruce is for kindling and quick heat. The birch is for sustained burn. I take an armload of birch, 6 pieces, maybe 7, enough to feed the stove for the next few hours. I carry them back to the cabin and set them on the porch. Then I return for kindling, a full armload of split spruce. Then I return again for another armload of birch. 3 trips. That is the morning load. There will be more later. Inside, the cabin has begun to warm. The fire is established now. I can hear it working. The crackle has settled into a steady murmur. I add 2 pieces of birch to the firebox and adjust the damper. The stove accepts them without complaint. The kettle is not yet boiling, but the water is moving. I can see the first bubbles forming along the bottom. I set out the cup and the coffee. The coffee is instant. I do not apologize for that. Instant coffee is reliable. It does not require a machine. It does not require electricity. It requires only hot water and a spoon. While I wait for the kettle, I check the window seals. This is a daily task in winter. The cold finds the weak points. It pushes through the smallest gaps. I run my hand along the edges of the glass and feel for drafts. The north window has a slight leak near the lower corner. I press the weather stripping back into place. It holds for now. Later, I will add a layer of plastic film to the inside of the frame. But that is not a morning task. The kettle begins to whistle. I pour the water over the coffee and stir. The steam rises and fogs my glasses. I take them off and set them on the table to clear. The coffee is too hot to drink. I hold the cup in both hands and let the warmth seep into my fingers. Outside, the gray line on the horizon has widened. The sky is moving from black to dark blue. The stars are fading. There is no color yet, just gradations of darkness becoming less dark. I drink the coffee slowly. There is no reason to rush. The day has its own schedule, and that schedule does not respond to hurry. The tasks will take as long as they take. Rushing creates mistakes. Mistakes in cold weather have consequences that rushing cannot undo. When the cup is empty, I rinse it with cold water and set it on the rack. The water in the rinse bucket is also frozen on top. I break the ice again. This is how it is. Every container of water that sits still will form ice. You break it, use what you need, and accept that you will break it again later. I add more wood to the stove. 2 more pieces of birch. The cabin is approaching comfortable now. The thermometer reads 38 degrees. Still cold by most standards, but workable. The stove will bring it higher over the next hour. By mid-morning, it will reach the low 50s. That is the target. Warm enough to work without gloves inside. Cool enough to keep the food storage from spoiling. I put on the outer layers again and step back outside. The sky has lightened further. The gray is spreading, and there is a faint warmth to the color now. Not warmth in the temperature, warmth in the hue. The first suggestion of pink along the ridge. The mountains to the east are still dark shapes against the brightening sky. Denali is not visible from here. The cabin sits in a valley, and the great mountain is blocked by the closer ridges. But its presence is felt. Everything in this part of Alaska is measured against that mountain, even when you cannot see it. The outhouse is the next task. It sits 40 feet from the cabin uphill and downwind. The path to it is clear, but the door has frost on the handle. I pull it open and step inside. The outhouse is simple. A wooden seat over a pit. A bag of lime in the corner. A roll of paper on a nail. I do what needs to be done. Add lime to the pit and leave. There is no lingering in an outhouse at 8 degrees. The generator shed is next. The generator provides electricity when I need it, which is not often. Today I need to run it for an hour to charge the batteries. The batteries power the radio and the few lights I use after dark. I could live without them. I have lived without them. But they make certain tasks easier, and in winter easier has value. The generator is a small gas unit. It starts on the second pull. The sound breaks the morning silence and echoes off the trees. I let it run while I attend to other things. The batteries will draw what they need. When the hour is done, I will shut it down and return to silence. The water situation requires attention. The main water source is a spring 200 yards from the cabin. In summer, I haul water in buckets. In winter, the spring is still flowing, but the path is harder, and the water freezes faster once it is collected. I have a system. I keep 2 5-gallon containers loose in the cabin at all times. One is in use. One is thawing from the previous day. When the first empties, the second replaces it, and I haul a new container from the spring to begin the thawing cycle again. Today the reserve container is still half frozen. The cabin was too cold overnight. I set it closer to the stove and leave it to continue thawing. The in-use container has enough for the day. Tomorrow I will haul more. The chickadees have arrived. They come every morning around this time, moving through the spruce trees in small groups. Their calls are sharp and clear in the cold air. I watch them for a moment. They do not seem bothered by the temperature. They move from branch to branch, searching for seeds and insects. Their metabolism runs hot. That is how they survive. They burn everything they eat almost immediately. I go to the storage cache and retrieve the suet block. The cache is a raised platform with a metal roof and walls. It keeps the bears out in summer and fall. In winter, the bears are asleep, but the cache still serves to protect the food from smaller animals. Wolverines, martens, squirrels. They will chew through almost anything if given time and opportunity. I hang the suet block from the wire near the cabin. This is not strictly necessary. The chickadees will survive without my help, but I have come to appreciate their company. In a place this quiet, their sound is a reminder that life continues. They arrive within minutes. 4 of them. Then 6. They take turns at the suet, pecking small pieces and retreating to the trees to eat. The light is stronger now. The pink on the horizon has deepened to orange, and the sky above it is pale blue. The sun is still below the ridge, but its light is reaching up and over. The snow on the ground catches that light and reflects it. The world is no longer gray. It is white and gold and blue. I check the woodshed again. Not to haul more wood yet. Just to assess. The supply is adequate for the next 2 weeks if the weather holds. If the temperature drops further, or if a storm comes, I will burn more. You cannot predict the weather here. You can only prepare for what might come and adjust when it arrives. The generator has been running for 40 minutes. I walk to the shed and to check the fuel level. Half a tank remaining. That is enough for today and tomorrow. I will refuel on the 3rd day. The fuel is stored in a separate container, uphill from the generator shed. This is a safety measure. You do not store gasoline near an ignition source. You carry what you need, and you carry it carefully. The generator shuts down at the 1-hour mark. I flip the switch, and the engine coughs and dies. The silence returns. It is not perfect silence. There is wind in the trees. There is the creak of branches. There is the occasional call of a raven in the distance. But compared to the generator, it is silence. I've become to notice the layers of quiet. The cabin makes sounds. The stove ticks as it heats and cools. The walls shift with temperature changes. The floor settles. These are not intrusions. They are the voice of the place doing its work. I return to the cabin and remove the outer layers. The thermometer inside reads 44 degrees. Better. The stove is working steadily. I add another piece of birch and leave the damper where it is. The fire does not need tending constantly. It needs attention at intervals. You learn the intervals over time. The morning tasks are complete. The fire is burning. The generator has charged the batteries. The suet is hanging. The water situation is stable for today. The cabin is warming. Now the day's real work can begin. I retrieve the tool bag from the corner near the door. Today's task is the north window, the one with the leaking weather stripping. A temporary fix is not enough. The window needs to be resealed properly, or it will continue to lose heat, and every bit of heat lost is wood that must be burned to replace it. I remove the interior trim around the window. The screws come out easily. I set them in a cup on the table so they do not roll away. The trim reveals the gap between the window frame and the wall. There is old insulation there, compressed and discolored. It has lost its effectiveness. I pull it out and set it aside. The gap is larger than I expected. Not dangerously so, but larger. The cabin has shifted slightly over the years. Wood moves. Wood breathes. The foundation is solid, but the structure above it responds to moisture and temperature. This gap is the result of that response. I cut new insulation from the roll I keep in the storage shed. I cut it slightly larger than the gap and compress it as I press it into place. The compression is important. It creates resistance. It fills the space completely. If the insulation is too loose, air will pass through it. If it is too tight, it will push against the frame and prevent a proper seal. I work slowly. There is no benefit to hurrying this task. Each section of the gap receives its own piece of insulation. I press and adjust and press again until the fit is correct. Then I replace the trim and drive the screws back into their holes. The screws bite into the wood with familiar resistance. When the trim is secure, I run my hand along the window edge again. The draft is gone. The seal is holding. I will check it again tomorrow and the day after. But for now, the task is complete. The sun has cleared the ridge. The light comes through the window and falls across the floor in a sharp rectangle. The angle is low. The shadows are long. But the light itself is strong. I stand in it for a moment and feel its warmth on my face. It is not much warmth, a few degrees at most, but it is there, and it is welcome. I eat a late breakfast. Oatmeal cooked on the stove. Dried cranberries stirred in. A second cup of coffee. The oatmeal is thick and hot, and it settles in the stomach with satisfying weight. Food is fuel here. You eat to work. You work to eat. The cycle is simple and direct. After breakfast, I wash the dishes. This is not a complicated task, but it requires attention. The water is heated on the stove in a small pot. The soap is simple. The rinsing is done with cold water from the bucket. The dishes are dried immediately and put away. Leaving them wet invites problems. In this air, water does not stay liquid for long. The afternoon stretches ahead. The light will begin to fade by 3 o'clock. That gives me 4 hours of workable daylight. I plan to spend them on the roof. The roof is metal, corrugated steel over a wooden frame. It sheds snow well when the pitch is right. But the pitch at the back corner has flattened slightly over the years. The snow accumulates there, and the weight stresses the structure beneath. Last week I noticed a sag in the ceiling boards. Not much. A 1/4 inch maybe. But a 1/4 inch today is a 1/2 inch next year, and a 1/2 inch is the beginning of failure. I retrieve the ladder from the side of the cabin and carry it to the back. The ladder is aluminum, light enough to carry alone, strong enough to hold my weight and tools. I set it against the eaves and test its footing in the snow. The feet sink slightly but hold. I will check them again before I climb. The tools go in the canvas bag that hangs from my shoulder. A hammer, a pry bar, a tape measure, roofing screws, a cordless drill with a fresh battery. The battery was on the charger last night. It shows full. In this cold, batteries drain faster than their gauges indicate. I bring a spare anyway. I climb the ladder slowly. Each rung receives my full weight before I move to the next. The metal is cold through my gloves. At the top, I step onto the roof and crouch low. The pitch is not steep here. I can stand if I am careful. but crouching is safer. A fall from this height onto frozen ground is not something to recover from easily. The problem area is visible immediately. The snow has built up in a drift against the chimney, and the metal beneath it is bowed. I brush the snow away with my gloved hand. The screws that hold the metal to the frame are pulling loose. Two of them are backed out almost completely. The metal flexes when I press it. I drive the loose screws back in with the drill. They bite, but the holes are worn. The screws will back out again with the next load of snow. I need to add new screws in new locations. I mark the spots with a pencil and drill pilot holes through the metal and into the frame beneath. Then I drive the new screws, 4 of them. They draw the metal tight against the wood. The repair is not permanent. Nothing here is permanent. But it will hold for this winter and likely the next. By then, I may need to replace the section entirely. I add that to the list of future tasks. The list is long. It is always long. You do not complete the list. You work through it, and new items appear. I descend the ladder and return the tools to the cabin. The work has taken longer than expected. The light has shifted. The sun is lower now, and the rectangle on the floor has moved toward the door. The shadows from the trees are reaching across the snow. I drink water from the thawed container. The water is cold, but no longer icy. My body has been working and it needs replacement. I drink a full cup, then another half cup. Then I eat a piece of dried fish from the container by the stove. The fish is salmon. I smoked it last fall. It is salty and rich and provides the fat the body craves in cold weather. The stove needs feeding again. I add 2 more pieces of birch and adjust the damper. The fire accepts them and continues its work. The cabin temperature has stabilized at 51 degrees. That is good. That is where I want it. Any higher, and the food storage becomes unreliable. Any lower, and the tasks become harder. The afternoon is fading. I use the remaining light to split kindling. The kindling box is nearly empty, and I will need it full for tomorrow morning. I set up the splitting block beside the woodshed and retrieve the hatchet from inside. The hatchet is sharp. I keep it sharp. A dull hatchet is more dangerous than a sharp one. It bounces and skips instead of cutting clean. I take a round of spruce from the pile and set it on the block. The grain is straight. That is what I look for when I cut kindling stock. Straight grain splits cleanly. Knotted wood fights the blade. The first swing separates the round into 2 halves. The second swing quarters 1 half. The third quarters the other. I continue until the quarters become eighths, and the eighths become kindling. The pieces are thin and pale. They will catch fire easily. That is their purpose. I fill the canvas kindling bag and carry it inside. The bag hangs on a hook beside the stove. Full now. Ready for tomorrow. This is how the days connect. Today's work enables tomorrow's function. Tomorrow's work will enable the day after. The chain does not break unless I break it. The light outside is orange and feasting. The sun has dropped behind the western ridge, and the sky is cycling through its evening colors. The temperature is falling. I can feel it in the air that pushes against the door when I open it to bring in more wood. 8 degrees this morning. It will be lower by nightfall. Perhaps 0. Perhaps below. I haul wood for the evening. 4 loads from the shed to the porch. Then from the porch to the stack beside the stove. The stack is waist high, enough for tonight and myself tomorrow. The rhythm is familiar. Walk to the shed. Load the arms. Walk back. Stack. Repeat. The body knows the motion. The mind can wander while the body works. I think about the spring. The path to the spring needs clearing before the snow gets deeper. A fallen branch blocked part of it last week. I worked around it then because the other tasks were more pressing. Now it joins the list. Tomorrow, maybe, or the day after. The list decides its own order based on urgency and weather. The cabin is warm when I return from the final load. Warm by cabin standards. 53 degrees. The stove is radiating steadily. I remove the outer layers and hang them on the hooks by the door. The coat, the hat, the gloves. They will be cold when I put them on again, but they will warm quickly. The body generates heat. The layers trap it. Dinner is simple. Rice cooked on the stove. Canned beans heated in a small pot. Dried onion and garlic added for flavor. The meal is not elegant, but it is filling. The body needs calories in this cold. It burns them constantly just to maintain temperature. I eat slowly, tasting each bite. There is no television here, no phone, no distraction. Just the food and the stove and the growing darkness outside the window. After dinner, I clean the dishes again. The same process as morning. Heat the water. Wash. Rinse. Dry. Put away. The repetition is not tedious. It is structure. The days here have structure because I give them structure. Without structure, the tasks accumulate and overwhelm. With structure, each task has its place, and the places are manageable. The darkness is complete now. The window shows nothing but black. I light the small lamp on the table and turn off the overhead light to save battery. The lamp casts a warm circle that reaches the stove and the chair, and not much further. The rest of the cabin recedes into shadow. This is how the evenings are. Small light, large darkness. The proportion feels correct. I read for an hour. A book I have read before. The story is familiar, which is why I chose it. In this setting, familiar is comfortable. New demands attention, and by evening attention is a resource that runs low. The familiar asks only that I follow along. I follow. The stove needs tending at 8 o'clock. I add 3 pieces of birch and close the damper slightly. The fire will burn slower now. It will last through the night if I have judged correctly. If I have not, I will wake to cold again, and the morning will begin the same way this one did. That is acceptable. Not preferred, but acceptable. I bank the fire carefully. The coals are deep and red. They will hold their heat for hours if the air supply is restricted properly. Too much air and they burn too fast. Too little and they smother. The balance is learned through repetition. I have learned it mostly. There are still nights when the balance fails. I prepare for bed. The sleeping bag is on the bunk in the corner. I shake it out and check for moisture. The bag is dry. Good. A wet sleeping bag is a serious problem. I lay the wool blanket over it and fold the bottom edge under to trap the warmth. I undress in layers. The outer layers first, then the middle layers. I keep the base layer on. Sleeping in cold requires insulation between the body and the bag. The bag provides some. The base layer provides more. Together they create a system that holds heat through the night. I turn off the lamp and climb into the bag. The darkness is as total. The silence is not. The stove ticks. The wind moves through the trees outside. A branch scrapes against the roof somewhere. These sounds are familiar now. They were strange once. The first weeks in this cabin, every sound was a question. Now they are answers. The stove is working. The wind is normal. The branch needs trimming, but not tonight. The cold presses against the walls. I can feel it as a presence, not a temperature. It waits. It does not force its way in, because the structure holds. The insulation holds. The fire holds. But the cold is patient. It will find any gap that opens. It will exploit any weakness that develops. This is not malice. It is physics. The cold does not want anything. It simply is. I lie still and let the warmth accumulate inside the bag. The body takes time to heat its space. 10 minutes. 15. Gradually the shivering stops. The muscles relax. The breathing slows. Tomorrow will be similar. Wake to whatever temperature the stove has maintained. Rebuild the fire if necessary. Check the water. Check the wood. Complete the tasks that the day requires. Eat. Work. Eat again. Sleep. The routine is not exciting. It is not meant to be. The routine is maintenance. It is the ongoing act of keeping a place functional in conditions that default toward dysfunction. The cabin does not stay warm on its own. The water does not stay liquid on its own. The food does not stay preserved on its own. Everything requires intervention. Everything requires attention. I do not resent this. Resentment would be pointless. This is the agreement I made when I came here. The place demands and I provide. In exchange, the place shelters. The exchange is fair. Neither side owes the other anything beyond the terms. Sleep comes slowly tonight. The mind reviews the day without intention. The window seal. The roof repair. The kindling. The wood. The small tasks completed and the larger ones postponed. The list shifts and resorts itself. Some items rise. Others fall. By morning, the order may be different. It usually is. The last sound I hear is the stove. A quiet pop as the wood adjusts to the heat. Then a long, slow hiss as the moisture escapes. The fire is working. The cabin is holding. The night is cold, but the night is not inside. Tomorrow there will be more. The morning arrives the same way. Mornings arrive here. Not with light, because the light is still an hour away, but with the awareness that sleep has ended and the day has begun. The body knows. The cold knows. The two meet somewhere in the space between the sleeping bag and the air, and the meeting is the alarm. The stove has held. I can tell before I look. The air in the cabin is cold but not bitter. 28 degrees maybe. 30. The fire has burned down to coals, but the coals are still alive. I can hear them clicking softly in the firebox. That sound means there is heat to work with. The morning will not require starting from nothing. I reach for the headlamp and click it on. The beam finds the stove immediately. Familiar shape. Familiar position. The door is closed, the damper is set, and a thin line of smoke rises from the chimney pipe, where it passes through the ceiling. Everything is where it should be. The routine begins again. I swing my legs out and set my feet on the floor. The cold is there waiting. It has not gone anywhere. It has simply been kept at bay by the layers and the fire and the structure. Now with my feet on the spruce boards, it reminds me of its presence. I stand and stretch and feel the stiffness in my back. Worse than yesterday. The roof work did that. Crouching and reaching and twisting in awkward positions. The body remembers every motion and charges interest overnight. I open the stove door and look inside. The coals are red and deep. Good. I add kindling first. 3 sticks of spruce. They catch immediately, flaring bright in the dark cabin. Then I add 2 pieces of birch, smaller than the ones I will add later. The fire needs to rebuild before it can accept the larger fuel. I leave the damper open and watch the flames grow. The water bucket has ice onto again. I break it with the ladle. The ice is thicker than yesterday. 1/4 inch, maybe more. The cabin dropped lower overnight than I estimated. That happens. The estimates are not perfect. The reality is what it is. I fill the kettle and set it on the stove. The water inside is cold enough that the kettle will take time to heat. I use that time to add more wood to the firebox. 2 more pieces of birch. The fire accepts them. The damper can close slightly now. The draw is established. The heat is building. I pull on the layers and step outside. The cold is sharper than yesterday. The thermometer reads 2 degrees. That is significant. Below 0 requires different considerations than single digits above. The body loses heat faster. Exposed skin is at risk. The equipment functions differently. Batteries drain faster. Lubricants thicken. Metal becomes brittle. I note the temperature and move to the woodshed. The door swings open with more resistance than usual. The hinges have tightened in the cold. I will need to lubricate them later. Today or tomorrow. Another item for the list. The wood inside the shed is cold to the touch, but it is dry, and dry wood burns regardless of its starting temperature. I load my arms and carry the first batch to the cabin. Then I return for more. 3 trips, same as yesterday. The firebox is hungry at this temperature. It will consume fuel faster to maintain the same heat output. That is the math of thermodynamics. You cannot cheat it. You can only supply it. The sky is beginning to lighten. Not with sunrise, but with the distant suggestion of sunrise. The stars are fading in the east. The horizon is a shade less black. The mountains remain dark shapes against the coming light. They do not reveal themselves until the sun is higher. For now, they are presence without detail. I check the chicken coop on my way back from the woodshed. There are no chickens in it now. The chickens went to a neighbor in the fall. Keeping chickens through an Alaska winter is possible, but demanding. The eggs are not worth the heat required to prevent them from freezing. The neighbor will return the birds in spring, along with a portion of the winter eggs. This is the arrangement. It works for both parties. The coop itself needs attention before spring. The roofing felt has lifted in one corner. Snow has gotten under it and frozen against the wood beneath. If I do not address it before the thaw, the meltwater will rot the framing. I add it to the list. The list is patient. It accepts all additions without complaint. The generator does not need to run today. The batteries are charged from yesterday. I check them anyway. The gauge shows full. In cold this deep, the gauge can be optimistic. The true capacity is lower, but for the radio and the lights full is sufficient. I will run the generator again in 3 days or sooner if the weather demands it. Back inside the kettle is beginning to steam. Not whistling yet, but close. The fire has raised the cabin temperature to 34 degrees. Progress. I add coffee to the cup and wait for the water. The window I repaired yesterday is holding. No draft at the edges. The insulation and the resealed trim are doing their work. One less problem to manage. The list shortens by one item, even as it lengthens by others. This is the equilibrium. You do not win against the list. You maintain position. The coffee is hot and bitter, bitter and necessary. I drink it standing by the stove, feeling the warmth rise through my chest. The second cup will come later. One is enough to start. The body needs to wake on its own terms. The day's primary task is clear. The path to the spring needs clearing. The fallen branch has been there for too long. Each day that passes makes the problem slightly worse. Snow accumulates on the branch. The branch settles deeper. The path around it becomes more circuitous. Today I will address it. I finish the coffee and rinse the cup. The stove has raised the temperature to 41 degrees. Good enough. The cabin will continue to warm while I am outside. When I return, it will be comfortable enough to remove layers. I gather the tools. The bow saw. The axe. The leather gloves that offer more protection than the wool ones. Cutting fallen timber is not delicate work. The hands need armor. The walk to the spring takes 10 minutes in good conditions. Today, with the detour around the branch, it takes 15. The snow is knee-deep in places where the wind has drifted it. I wade through, lifting my feet high and setting them down deliberately. Rushing through deep snow exhausts the legs. You learn to pace. The branch is larger than I remembered. It is not a branch, really. It is a limb, a substantial section of a spruce tree that cracked and fell during a windstorm 3 weeks ago. The main trunk is still standing, but this limb, perhaps 80 inches in diameter, lies across the path like a barricade. I assess the work. The limb is too large to move intact. It needs to be sectioned. 3 cuts should do it. Maybe 4. Each section can then be rolled aside or dragged to a clearing where it will not obstruct the path. I start with the bow saw. The teeth bite into the bark and find the wood beneath. The motion is long and even. Push-pull. Push-pull. The saw does the cutting. The arms provide only guidance and pressure. You do not muscle a saw through wood. You let it work. The first cut takes 10 minutes. The wood is dense and cold, and the saw binds twice before I clear it. When the section separates, I drag it aside and return to the limb. The second cut is easier. The curve is established now, and I know the rhythm. 8 minutes this time. The section comes free, and I drag it to join the first. The third cut encounters a knot. The saw struggles. The teeth skip and catch and skip again. I stop and examine the situation. The knot is deep, and the grain around it is twisted. Forcing the saw will dull the blade or break a tooth. I switch to the axe. The axe is heavier and less precise, but it does not care about knots. The blade finds the wood and removes it in chips. I swing steadily, letting the weight of the head do the work. The chips fly. The cut widens. The knot resists for a time, but the axe is patient. Eventually, the resistance fails and the section separates. The final cut is clean. The saw moves through it without trouble. The path is clear. I stand and look at the work. The limb that blocked the way is now 4 sections lying in the snow. Tomorrow or the day after, I will haul them to the woodpile and split them. Spruce is not the best firewood, but it is fuel, and fuel is not wasted here. The walk back to the cabin follows the cleared path. It is easier now. The snow is packed where I walked earlier. The detour is no longer necessary. 10 minutes as it should be. Inside the cabin has reached 50 degrees. The stove is working well. I hang the tools on their hooks and remove the outer layers. The work has warmed me. The body steams slightly as the exertion heat escapes. I eat a late breakfast, the same as yesterday. Oatmeal and dried fruit and coffee. The repetition is not monotony. It is efficiency. I know what the meal provides. I know how long it sustains me. There is no need to experiment when the formula works. The afternoon stretches before me. The primary task is complete. The secondary tasks are many. I choose based on light and energy and weather. The hinges on the woodshed door need lubrication. That is a short task. I retrieve the can of lubricant from the shelf and carry it outside. The hinges are brass-old and worn. They have been here longer than I have. I work the lubricant into the pivot points and swing the door several times to distribute it. The movement smooths. The resistance eases. Done. The firewood needs assessment. I enter the shed and walk the rows. The spruce supply is adequate. 3 weeks, maybe 4. The birch supply is lower. 2 weeks at the current burn rate. If the cold continues, that rate will increase. I make a note to prioritize birch hauling when the next mild day arrives. Mild is relative. Anything above 20 degrees is mild in this context. The afternoon light is flat and gray. The sun has not appeared today. It rose behind the ridge, traveled its low arc, and set behind the opposite ridge without ever clearing the mountains. This happens in deep winter. There are days when the sun is present, but not visible. The light comes, but it comes filtered through cloud and ridge. You know the sun is there because the darkness lifts. You do not see it directly. I return to the cabin and add wood to the stove. The fire has burned down slightly during my absence. I build it back up. 3 pieces of birch. The damper opens to give it air. The flames respond. The heat builds. The water situation requires attention. The reserve container is nearly thawed. I test it with the ladle. The ice has retreated to a small chunk in the center. By evening, it will be fully liquid. Tomorrow, I will haul more from the spring. The cleared path makes that task easier. I spend an hour mending a tear in the canvas kindling bag. The tear appeared last week when a sharp piece of spruce poked through. I ignored it then because other tasks were more pressing. Now with the kindling bag full and the mending kit available, I address it. The stitches are rough but functional. They will hold until spring, when I can replace the bag entirely. The radio crackles once at 4 o'clock. A distant voice barely audible. Someone calling a station further north. The words are unintelligible, just fragments of sound through static. The signal fades and does not return. This happens. The radio works for communication within a limited range, and sometimes signals from outside, that rains drift through. They are reminders that the world continues beyond this valley. The reminders are not necessary, but they are not unwelcome. Dinner is similar to last night. Rice, beans, dried meat this time instead of fish. The variation is slight, but it is variation. The body appreciates small changes even when the structure remains constant. After dinner, the routine continues. Dishes, fire, lamp, reading. The book is the same one as last night. I am further along now. The characters are facing difficulties that I know they will overcome. The predictability is comforting in a way that would be boring elsewhere. Here, predictability is a resource. It does not deplete. The stove is banked at 8:30. The temperature outside has dropped further. The thermometer on the porch reads -4. That is cold enough to demand respect. The fire is set carefully. The damper is adjusted precisely. The coals are deep and well established. I prepare for bed the same way as before. Layers removed in order. Base layer retained. Sleeping bag shaken out. Wool blanket laid over top. The routine is the same because the routine works. Changing it would introduce uncertainty, and uncertainty at night is the enemy of rest. The darkness closes in as I turn off the lamp. The sounds are the same. The stove, the wind, the branch that still scrapes the roof. I will trim that branch when the weather allows. Not soon. The cold will hold for days, perhaps weeks. The branch will scrape until then. I think about the work completed today. The path is clear. The hinges are smooth. The kindling bag is mended. The window holds. The roof repair holds. The firewood supply is known. The water supply is stable. Tomorrow will bring new tasks and the continuation of old ones. The spring needs visiting. The birch supply needs monitoring. The generator will need fuel eventually. The chicken coop needs repair before spring. The list does not end. It shifts and reorganizes, but it does not end. This is the understanding. The work continues because the place requires it. The place provides shelter because the work continues. The balance is maintained through attention and effort. When the attention lapses, the balance tips. When the effort fails, the consequences accumulate. I am tired in the way that physical work creates. The muscles are heavy. The thoughts are slow. Sleep will come soon, and it will be deep, and the morning will arrive with its cold and its demands, and the cycle will begin again. The stove clicks once as the wood adjusts. The sound is familiar. The sound is correct. The fire is burning. The cabin is holding. The night settles over the valley, and the cold presses against the walls, and the structure holds, and the routine waits for morning. There is nothing dramatic in any of this. There is no climax approaching. There is no resolution building. There is only the work and the place and the cold and the fire, and the steady passage of days that require what they require. This is enough. This is what there is. The morning will come, and it will be colder or warmer, or the same. The tasks will present themselves in whatever order the conditions demand. I will address them. I will complete what can be completed, and postpone what must be postponed. The list will shift again. The balance will hold, or it will not. And if it does not, I will work to restore it. For now, the fire burns. The walls hold. The night deepens. Tomorrow it continues. The third morning arrives different from the others, not in its demands, which are the same, not in its cold, which is deeper. The difference is in the light. The clouds have cleared overnight, and the sky is black and sharp with stars when I wake. The stove has held again. The system is working. The coals glow when I open the firebox door, and the kindling catches immediately. The routine proceeds. Water, fire, layers. The thermometer outside reads -11. That is the coldest it has been since I arrived this season. -11 requires careful attention to every exor. The skin cannot be left uncovered for more than a few minutes. The fingers go numb quickly. The nose and cheeks are vulnerable. I dress with particular care. The wool balaclava that usually hangs unused. The second pair of gloves worn over the first. The gaiters that seal the gap between boots and pants. Every point of entry must be closed. The walk to the woodshed feels different in this cold. The air is dense and still. Sound carries further. My footsteps crunch with unusual clarity. The trees are silent, holding themselves tight against the temperature. Even the chickadees are absent this morning. They will come later, when the sun brings a few degrees of relief. The wood I carry back to the cabin is cold enough to sting through the gloves. I stack it quickly and return inside. The fire needs feeding more frequently at this temperature. The cabin is fighting to hold its warmth against a greater pressure. The water situation has changed overnight. The reserve container, which was fully thawed yesterday evening, has frozen solid at the top again. Not a skin of ice. A solid cap several inches thick. The cold found its way inside while I slept. Perhaps through the door which I opened once in the night to check the thermometer. Perhaps through some gap I have not yet discovered. The cold is patient and it is thorough. I set the container closer to the stove and accept that the thawing will take most of the day. The in-use container still has liquid water beneath its ice. I break through and ladle enough for the morning kettle. The spring run can wait until the temperature moderates. -11 is not weather for a half-mile walk through knee-deep snow. The coffee is a necessity this morning, more than a pleasure. The body needs warming from inside as well as outside. I drink it quickly and pour a second cup without waiting. The heat spreads through the chest and reaches the extremities. The fingers remember their function. The face relaxes from its heightened grimace. The primary task today is interior. I cannot work outside effectively in this cold, and the cabin offers work that needs doing. The floorboards near the south wall have developed a gap. The wood has shrunk as it dried over the years, and now there is a visible line between two boards. Cold air seeps through. I can feel it when I kneel beside it. I retrieve the wood filler from the repair supplies and the putty knife that has seen many such jobs. The filler is stiff in its container. The cold has thickened it. I set the container on top of the stove for a few minutes to soften the material. While I wait, I inspect the rest of the floor. There are other gaps, smaller ones near the corners and along the edges where the boards meet the walls. These have been there since before my time. They are filled with a mixture of wood shavings and some kind of old caulk that has darkened with age. The fills are holding. They do not need replacement yet, but I note their locations. They are the next line of defense if the current repairs fail. The filler has softened enough to work. I kneel beside the gap and press the material into the seam with the putty knife. The motion is deliberate. You cannot rush this work. The filler must reach the bottom of the gap and expand to fill it completely. If you leave air pockets, the cold will find them. The cold always finds them. I work the length of the gap, applying filler and smoothing it with the blade. The excess scrapes away and returns to the container. Nothing is wasted. The filler will set over the next several hours as it dries. Tomorrow I will sand it smooth and check for settling. If it has shrunk, I will add a second layer. The stove needs attention during this work. I stop every 15 minutes to add wood or adjust the damper. The rhythm is automatic now. Work pause, tend the fire, return to work. The cabin temperature rises slowly. 48 degrees, 51, 54. The stove is working hard against the cold outside. By midday, the gap is filled and the floor work is complete. I wash my hands with water, warmed on the stove, and eat a lunch of crackers and dried cheese and the last of yesterday's rice, reheated in a small pot. The meal is not inspiring, but it provides what the body requires. The afternoon brings a change. The sun, which has been climbing its low arc above the eastern ridge, finally clears the trees and sends direct light through the south window. The rectangle of warmth falls across the floor and reaches the chair where I sit. It is not much warmth, but it is present, and it is welcome, and it is free. The stove provides heat, but the stove consumes wood. The sun provides heat from its own burning millions of miles away. The math of that is worth considering. But not now. Now I sit in the light and let it reach my face. The chickadees arrive with the sun. Their calls announce them before they appear. I watch through the window as they find the suet block and begin their work. 6 of them today. They take turns as they always do. There is an order to their feeding, a hierarchy I do not fully understand. The same birds seem to eat first each time. The others wait their turn without complaint. The radio offers nothing this afternoon. I try the channels and find only static. The cold and the clear sky sometimes interfere with signal propagation. Or perhaps there is simply no one transmitting within range. Either way, the silence continues. I do not mind it. The radio is useful for emergencies and weather information. It is not necessary for companionship. The chickadees provide what companionship is needed. The thermometer outside has risen to -4. That is a significant improvement. The sun is doing its work. By evening, it may reach 0 or slightly above. Tomorrow may be warmer still. The cold arrives in waves, and this wave may be cresting. I use the afternoon warmth to address a task I have been postponing. The propane tank needs checking. The cabin uses propane for one purpose only, the backup heater. The backup heater has not been used this season because the wood stove has been sufficient. But the backup heater exists for the nights when the wood stove fails, and for those nights, the propane must be ready. The tank sits in a sheltered box on the north side of the cabin. The box protects it from snow accumulation and direct wind. I open the box and examine the tank. The gauge reads 3/4 full. That is adequate. A full tank lasts for weeks of continuous use. 3/4 will last for any emergency that might arise before spring resupply. I check the connections while I am here. The regulator is secure. The hose is intact. No cracks visible in the rubber. The shut-off valve turns freely. Everything is in order. The system is ready if it is needed. The hope is that it will not be needed. The walk back to the cabin is easier than this morning. The temperature has risen enough that the air does not burn the lungs. My face is cold but not at risk. The sun is low now, touching the western ridge, and its light has gone orange and soft. The snow catches the color and holds it. For a few minutes, the entire valley is golden. I stand outside and watch the light fade. This is not productive time. There are tasks that could be done, inventory that could be checked, wood that could be split. But there are also moments that ask only to be witnessed, and this is one of them. The gold deepens to copper and then to purple. The shadows stretch until they merge into a single darkness. The sun drops behind the ridge, and the cold returns immediately. Inside the cabin has held its warmth. 55 degrees. The stove is steady. I add wood for the evening and begin the dinner preparation. Tonight is different from the mod 2 nights. Tonight I cook something that requires more attention. Bannock bread mixed from flour and baking powder, and salt cooked in the cast iron skillet on the stovetop. The bread takes time and careful heat management. Too hot and it burns on the bottom, while the center stays raw. Too cool and it never rises properly. I mix the dough in a bowl and let it rest while the skillet heats. The skillet is old and well seasoned. It belonged to someone before me. Many people, perhaps. The surface is black and smooth, built up over years of use. A good cast iron skillet is a tool that improves with time. This one has improved for decades. The bannock goes into the skillet and begins to cook. I flip it once, twice, 3 times, watching the surface for the right color. When it is done, I tear off a piece and taste it. Hot and slightly dunsy, and touched with salt. It is good. Not restaurant. Good, not even home kitchen good. But good for a cabin in Alaska in winter. Good for this place and this time. I eat the bannock with beans and the last of the dried fish. The meal is substantial. The body is satisfied. The fire burns. The night settles in. The 4th day brings more cold, but less than before. -2 at dawn. A warmth wave by this week's standards. I complete the morning routine and turn my attention outward. The spring run cannot be postponed further. The reserve container is thawed, but the in-use container is nearly empty. Water is not optional. I prepare the 5-gallon container and the pack frame that carries it. The pack frame distributes the weight across the back and hips. A full container weighs over 40 pounds. Carrying that weight in your arms for a 1/4 mile through snow is possible but foolish. The frame makes it manageable. The path to the spring is clear, thanks to the work I did 2 days ago. The fallen limb is gone sectioned and waiting to be split. The snow is packed where my feet have traveled before. I walk quickly, breathing steady, letting the body warm itself through motion. The spring emerges from a rocky outcrop on a hillside 200 yards from the cabin. It flows year-round, fed by groundwater that does not freeze. The water is cold and keen and requires no treatment. I have drunk from this spring for months without issue. Others have drunk from it for years before me. The flow is slower in winter, but still steady. A trickle that takes time to fill the container. I set the container beneath the spout and wait. The water splashes against the plastic and begins to pool at the bottom. I watch and think of nothing in particular. The sound of the water is constant and simple. The cold presses at my back, but my front is sheltered by the outcrop. The balance is tolerable. The container fills in 10 minutes. I cap it and lift it onto the pack frame. The weight settles onto my hips. I adjust the straps and begin the walk back. The return is slower. The weight makes each step deliberate. The snow that was easy to walk through becomes a series of small obstacles. Each time my boot sinks, I must lift not only my leg, but the additional 40 pounds. The muscles work. The breath comes harder. By the time I reach the cabin, I am warm despite the cold. I set the container inside near the stove, and remove the pack frame. The straps have left pressure marks on my shoulders. They will fade in an hour. The water is secure. Tomorrow I will begin using it, and the cycle will continue. The day proceeds. The stove burns. The tasks present themselves. I replace a cracked pane of glass in the window of the storage shed. The glass is thin and old, and the crack has been there since fall. But the cold has widened it, and now the gap lets in weather. The replacement pane is cut from a larger sheet I keep for this purpose. The fit is not perfect, but it is close enough. Glazing compound seals the edges. I split the spruce sections from the fallen limb. The wood is cold and hard, but the axe finds the grain and the pieces fall apart cleanly. By afternoon, I have added 40 pieces of split spruce to the kindling supply. That is 2 weeks of kindling, maybe more. The task that was urgent a few days ago is now complete. The light fades earlier than I expect. Clouds have returned, covering the sky. The uniform gray. The temperature holds steady at 4 degrees. Not warming, not cooling. A pause in the weather, while the systems reposition. I bring in wood for the night. Extra tonight, in case the clouds bring snow. Snow can fall quickly here, and being caught outside in it is unpleasant. Better to have more wood inside than necessary. Dinner is simple again. The bannock from last night, sliced and toasted on the stovetop. More beans. A handful of dried apricots for sweetness. The body accepts what it is given. The evening passes. The stove ticks. The wind rises outside, and I can hear it moving through the trees. The branch that scrapes the roof scrapes more persistently. Tomorrow, I will check the weather before deciding on tasks. If the wind drops and the sky clears, I will climb to the roof and trim that branch. If the conditions remain poor, I will find indoor work. There is always indoor work. The 5th day is a snow day. The flakes begin before dawn, falling steady and thick. By the time I wake, 3 inches have accumulated, and more is coming. The sky is a flat white, no depth, no variation. The snow falls straight down in the still air. The cabin responds to snow days with particular demands. The path to the woodshed must be cleared. The porch must be swept. The area around the chimney must be monitored. Snow accumulating against hot metal can cause problems. Steam. Cracking. The seal can fail if the temperature differentials are too great. I dress for the weather and step outside with the shovel. The snow is light and dry, the kind that moves easily but drifts with the slightest wind. I clear the path to the woodshed first. 20 feet of shoveling, pushing the snow to either side. Then the porch. Then the area around the chimney, working carefully on the sloped roof, anchoring myself with one hand while I sweep with the other. The work takes an hour. By the time I finish the path, I cleared first has another inch of snow on it. This is how snow days proceed. You work, and the snow undoes your work, and you work again. The goal is not to defeat the snow. The goal is to maintain passage until the snow stops. I return inside and tend the fire. The cabin is cold from my repeated entries and exits. Each time the door opens, heat escapes and cold enters. The stove works harder to compensate. I add extra wood and close the dampers slightly to extend the burn. The morning passes in a rhythm of clearing and warming. Every 90 minutes, I check the path and the porch and the chimney area. Every 90 minutes, I clear what has accumulated. The snow continues. By early afternoon, the accumulation reaches 6 inches. The path to the woodshed requires more effort to clear. The shovel bites deeper. The muscles work harder. I pace myself, stopping to rest, drinking water, maintaining the body's reserves. The snow stops at 3 o'clock. The clouds remain, but the flakes cease falling. The world is white and silent and mounded. The trees hold snow on every branch. The woodshed is outlined in white. The cabin itself is a dark shape against the brightness, smoke rising from the chimney and disappearing into the gray sky. I make a final pass with the shovel, clearing the accumulation from the last 90 minutes. The path is clean. The porch is clean. The chimney area is clear. Now the work is to maintain, not to clear. The snow will settle overnight. Tomorrow it will pack, and the paths will be easier to walk. Inside, the fire burns steady. The temperature has stabilized at 52 degrees. I am tired from the repeated physical work, but it is a satisfied tiredness. The kind that comes from meeting a challenge that was clear and present and manageable. Dinner is early tonight. The body has burned more calories than usual and demands replenishment. I cook a larger portion of rice, add more beans, include a piece of smoked salmon that I had been saving. The meal is substantial, and I eat all of it. The evening is quiet. The snow has silenced the world outside. I cannot hear the wind in the trees because there is no wind. I cannot hear the distant ravens because they have taken shelter. There is only the stove and the lamp, and the pages of the book, and the steady deepening of darkness outside the window. The 6th day dawns clear. The sky is blue and endless, and the sun rises above the ridge in a burst of orange and gold. The snow catches the light and multiplies it. I squint against the brightness until my eyes adjust. The temperature has dropped overnight. The thermometer reads -8. The clear sky has allowed the heat to escape into space. But the sun is strong and the day will warm. By noon it may approach 0. By afternoon, perhaps above. The path to the woodshed is solid underfoot. The snow has packed as I predicted. My boots leave shallow prints instead of deep holes. The walking is easier. The hauling is easier. Everything is easier when the snow cooperates. I use the morning to complete the branch trimming I have been postponing. The branch that scrapes the roof must go. The ladder goes up. The saw comes out. The climb is careful, the footing tested at each step. The branch is not large, perhaps 2 inches in diameter, but it reaches from a spruce tree at the edge of the clearing and touches the roof with every wind. The scraping sound has become familiar, but familiarity is not acceptance. The branch will damage the roofing eventually, if it has not already. It must be removed. I position myself on the roof, crouched low, one hand gripping the ridge cap. The branch is within reach. I extend the saw and begin cutting. The motion is awkward because I cannot use both hands without releasing my grip. The cut is slow, but it proceeds. The branch separates and falls to the snow below. The sound it makes is soft, a quiet thud. I examine the roof where it had been touching. The metal shows scratches but no damage. The membrane beneath is intact. The repair I made earlier this week is holding. I descend the ladder and retrieve the fallen branch. It joins the others in the pile that will become firewood. Nothing is wasted. The tree has lost a limb, but the limb will return its stored energy to the cabin as heat. The afternoon is dedicated to rest. The past days have demanded physical effort, and the body requires recovery. I sit by the stove and read. I drink tea which I have been saving for occasions, when rest is the task. The tea is black and strong and aromatic. It changes the character of the afternoon. The sun moves across the sky and begins its descent. The shadows lengthen. The temperature, which peaked at 2 degrees above zero, begins falling. By evening, it will be thawed again. Tomorrow, it may be colder still, or it may be warmer. The weather does not consult my preference. I prepare for another night. The routine is unchanged. Wood stacked, fire banked, dinner cooked and eaten, dishes cleaned, lamp lit, book read. The sameness is not tedium. It is structure that enables function. The night arrives, and the darkness fills the valley, and the cold settles against the walls, and the fire burns, and the cabin holds, and I sleep. The days continue. They blend into each other, distinguished by their tasks, and their temperatures, and their small incidents. A fox crosses the clearing one morning, red against the white snow, pausing to look toward the cabin before continuing into the trees. A raven lands on the porch rail and eyes me through the window, then flies away when I move toward the door. The wind returns one afternoon and blows for 6 hours, scouring the snow from the exposed surfaces and piling it against the northern walls. I address what each day requires. I postpone what can wait. I maintain the balance between the cabin's needs and my own energy. The balance shifts constantly. Some days I accomplish more than expected. Other days the cold or the weather or my own fatigue limits what can be done. Neither outcome is failure. Both are the work proceeding as the work proceeds. The firewood supply diminishes. The birch that seemed adequate 2 weeks ago now seems less so. I spend a day hauling more from the standing dead trees 1/2 mile from the cabin. The work is hard and cold, but the pile beside the woodshed grows and the concern eases. The water system functions. The spring flows. The containers freeze and thaw and freeze again. I haul and carry and break ice and haul again. The rhythm is familiar now. The weight of 40 pounds on the pack frame is expected, not noticed. The generator runs every 3rd day for an hour. The batteries charge. The radio works when I need it. The lights illuminate the darkness when the lamp is not enough. The weeks pass. The solstice approaches, bringing the shortest day, after which the light begins its slow return. The return will be gradual. Minutes at first, then longer. By February, the days will be noticeably longer. By March, the sun will have real strength. By April, the snow will begin to melt. But those months are distant. For now, there is the cold and the dark and the fire and the routine. I do not count the days in terms of waiting. I do not wait for spring. I exist in the present day, addressing what the present day requires. Tomorrow will require what it requires. The day after the same. The chain does not break because I do not expect it to break. I simply add each link as it comes. The cabin holds. The stove burns. The walls keep out what must be kept out and hold in what must be held in. The balance is maintained through constant attention, and the attention does not waver because wavering has consequences, and the consequences are clear. This is the work. This is what it means to keep a place like this functioning. It is not adventure. It is not escape. It is responsibility accepted and met, day after day, task after task, season after season. The night deepens. The fire burns low and steady. The coals glow in the darkness of the firebox. Tomorrow will come, as it always does, with its cold and its demands and its small completions. There is nothing more satisfying about it than that. It continues. The morning after the longest night, it arrives with a cold that feels different. Not sharper, not deeper, but somehow more settled. As if the cold has decided to stay and is no longer fighting for position. The thermometer reads -14. That is the coldest number I have seen this season. It will likely not be the coldest I see before the season ends. The stove has held but barely. The coals are dim when I check them, almost smothered by their own ash. I clean the firebox more thoroughly than usual, scraping the grate until the metal shows through. The fire needs room to breathe. The cold outside is pressing hard enough that any restriction matters. The kindling catches slowly in this temperature. The cold has reached into the cabin more deeply overnight, and the wood itself is reluctant to burn. I hold the match longer than usual, watching the flame transfer from paper to stick to larger stick. When the fire finally establishes, I close the door part way and stand beside the stove, waiting for the first real heat to reach my hands. The water is frozen solid, both containers. The reserve that was thawed yesterday, and the working container that still held liquid when I went to sleep. The cold found both of them in the night and took them completely. I set them near the stove and accept that water will be a project today, not a given. The morning tasks proceed in their altered form. I cannot wash with water because there is no liquid water. I cannot make coffee because the coffee requires water. I eat dried fruit and a piece of bannock saved from 2 days ago and drink nothing. The body can wait. The body has waited before. The walk to the woodshed is brief and brutal. The cold attacks every exposed surface. I feel it on my cheekbones, on the bridge of my nose, on the thin skin around my eyes. The balaclava helps, but does not eliminate the sensation. The wood in the shed is cold enough that it burns to touch even through the gloves. I load my arms and return quickly. By mid-morning, one container has thawed enough to yield water. I break through the softened top layer and ladle water into the kettle. The kettle goes on the stove. The wait begins. The coffee, when it finally comes, is the most welcome thing I have tasted in days. The extreme cold continues through the day. The sun rises and crosses the sky and sets without raising the temperature above -8. The cabin fights to maintain its warmth. The stove burns continuously. I feed it every hour instead of every 90 minutes. The firewood consumption rate increases accordingly. The math shifts in winter's favor. I do not venture far from the cabin today. The tasks that require distance are postponed. The tasks that can be done inside are addressed. I inventory the food supply, counting cans and packages and dried goods. The count is reassuring. 2 months of food remained, assuming normal consumption. If consumption increases due to cold, perhaps 6 weeks. That is still adequate. The resupply run is scheduled for late February. I repair a tear in the wool blanket that I noticed last night. The tear is small, caught early before it could widen. The stitches are simple but effective. The blanket will hold. I sharpen the axe, which has dulled slightly from the recent splitting work. The file moves across the blade in long, even strokes. The sound is rhythmic and calming. The edge returns and I test it with my thumb. Sharp enough to shave the hair from my arm. Sharp enough for any work it will meet. The afternoon passes in this manner. Small tasks completed. Small preparations made. The fire tended. The water monitored. The cold acknowledged, but not allowed to dictate more than it must. By evening, the temperature has dropped further. -17 at sundown. -20 by the time I bank the fire for the night. These numbers are significant. At -20, exposed skin can freeze in minutes. At -20, the cabin's defenses are tested seriously. At -20, a failure in the heating system is not an inconvenience, but a danger. I bank the fire with extra care. The coals are deep. The damper is set precisely. The wood is positioned to burn slowly, but steadily through the night. I add one more piece than usual, a large round of birch that will take hours to consume. The fire accepts it without complaint. The sleeping bag is warmer than it has been any night this season. I add a second wool blanket on top, borrowed from the storage chest. The layers multiply. The body heat that escapes is trapped and held. I fall asleep with the stove clicking, and the cold pressing and the structure holding. The morning after the coldest night arrives with unexpected warmth. The thermometer reads -4. That is a 20-degree rise overnight. The system is shifting. Warmer air is moving in from the south, riding over the cold mass that has settled in the valley. The contrast creates weather. By noon, the temperature has reached +8. The snow on the roof begins to release in small avalanches, sliding down the metal and piling at the base of the walls. The icicles that formed at the eaves during the extreme cold begin to drip. Water sounds return to the landscape after days of frozen silence. The warmth continues through the afternoon. The sun adds its contribution, and by 3 o'clock, the temperature reaches 12 degrees above zero. This is not warm by any external standard, but compared to the past 3 days, it feels like spring. I step outside without the balaclava and feel the air on my face without pain. The thaw brings its own tasks. The snow piles at the base of the walls must be cleared before they freeze into permanent obstacles. The meltwater draining from the roof must be directed away from the foundation. The paths that packed hard during the cold are now softening and will become difficult to walk if not maintained. I spend the afternoon on drainage work. A shallow trench dug in the snow channels the meltwater away from the cabin's base. The trench is crude but functional. It will serve until the next freeze, which may come tonight, or tomorrow, or the day after. The weather does not provide long-term forecasts. The evening brings clouds. They roll in from the south, following the warm air that preceded them. The sky closes over and the light fades early. The temperature stabilizes at 8 degrees and holds there as darkness falls. The extremes of the past days have paused. I eat a larger dinner than usual, celebrating nothing in particular except the easing of conditions. The body has worked hard during the cold spell. It deserves replenishment. The bannock is fresh baked this afternoon, while the cabin held its warmth easily. The beans are seasoned with more care than usual. The meal is not elaborate, but it is satisfying in a way that simple survival eating is not. The fire burns gently tonight. The stove does not need to work as hard against the outside temperature. I close the damper further than I have in a week and let the burn slow. The wood supply appreciates the respite. Every stick not burned tonight is a stick available for the next cold spell. The night passes quietly. The clouds hold the warmth against the earth like a blanket. The temperature drops only slightly, reaching 0 by dawn. The morning arrives not with the brutal announcement of extreme cold, but with the gentler pressure of ordinary winter. Ordinary is welcome. Ordinary is manageable. The days that follow settle into a more sustainable rhythm. The temperatures range from -10 to +5, varying with the weather systems that pass through. The snow falls occasionally, adding inches that are cleared and then replaced and cleared again. The sun rises a minute later each morning and sets a minute earlier each evening as the solstice approaches. I work through the task list methodically. The chicken coop roof receives its patch. The weather stripping around the main door is replaced. The shelf in the storage shed that has been sagging is reinforced with a new bracket. Each task completed is a problem removed from the future. The spring continues to flow. The water continues to freeze and thaw. The fire continues to burn. The cycle persists because I persist in maintaining it. This is not heroic. This is simply what is required. The cabin does not care whether I am heroic or ordinary. The cabin cares only that the work is done. The solstice arrives on a clear night, with the temperature at -6. I do not celebrate it with any ceremony. The significance is noted and accepted. From this night forward, the days will lengthen. The progress will be slow, measured in minutes at first, but it will be progress. The darkness has reached its peak and will now recede. I stand outside for a moment after banking the fire. The stars are sharp and countless overhead. The Milky Way stretches across the sky in a band of light that seems close enough to touch. The silence is complete, except for the faint tick of the cooling stove behind me. This is what winter in Alaska offers. The cold and the dark and the endless work of maintenance, yes. But also this. The clarity of the sky when nothing between you and space except a thin layer of air. The stillness when no sound competes with your own breathing. The solitude that is not loneliness, but simply the state of being alone in a place that does not require company. I return inside and close the door. The cabin holds its warmth. The fire will burn through the night. Tomorrow will bring its tasks, and I will address them, as I have addressed all the others. The work continues because the place requires it. The place provides because the work continues. This is the balance. This is the understanding. This is enough. The night deepens, and the cold settles, and the stars wheel slowly overhead in their ancient patterns. Inside the cabin, the fire glows, and the walls hold, and the morning waits at a distance that grows shorter with each passing hour. There is nothing more dramatic than this. There is nothing more needed than this. It is simply what it is, and what it is continues, and what continues must be maintained, and what is maintained becomes what it is. The cycle has no end except the ending I choose not to consider. For now, the fire burns. For now, the cabin holds. For now, the work proceeds. And tomorrow, it will be the same, with variations too small to matter and consequences too distant to fear. This is enough. This is what there is.